Just like your average person, I came to a point where I was tired of being broke all the time and tired of being dependent on my parents. I really just wanted to know, what can I do to get from even just from A to B, not even from A to Z.
Welcome back to An Entrepreneur's Vibes, the podcast that gives insight into the minds of visionary entrepreneurs and business leaders. Brought to you by The Right Direction, a leading professional and technical writing company based in North America. Each episode, we explore the stories and experiences of those who dared to dream, took the leap, and built their own empires. Join us in uncovering the secrets to success and lessons learned along the way. So if you're just starting out your entrepreneurial journey or you're already a seasoned business pro, you'll find inspiration, knowledge, and good vibes right here. Today, we're thrilled to welcome a powerhouse in the financial literary space. Our guest is the founder of Finance for the Culture, a revolutionary platform that brings the gap between financial literacy and everyday Canadians. Her journey from having just $200 to her name, a 476 credit score, and no savings, to saving up $40,000 in just 9 months and becoming a licensed financial services professional is nothing short of inspiring. Through her platform, she has helped thousands of Canadians improve their financial habits, offering services like financial literacy workshops, customized financial plans, debt management, income protection, and investment strategies. We're here to dive into her entrepreneurial journey, her passion for education, and how she's empowering people to take control of their financial future. Welcome to the show, Shay Myers. How are you doing today?
Thank you. That was very nice. I appreciate it. I'm great. How are you?
I'm really great. I'm so excited to be here today and have this conversation. There's so many things I feel like we can share with our audience, especially when it comes to financial literacy. So I'm really excited that you can be here today.
Yes, thank you.
So, can you share with us your journey, how you came to the financial space, and how you found yourself in the world of finance?
Yes. So I always say that finance found me. I never in a million years thought that I would be in the space. Just like your average person, I came to a point where I was tired of being broke all the time and tired of being dependent on my parents. And I really just wanted to know, what can I do to get from A, even just from A to B, not even from A to Z, like literally, what can I do to get 2% better, you know? And so I actually found my financial advisor on social media. I'd been at that part of my journey, I was really looking for someone who could help me out and educate me, and the rest is history. But a bit about what my life looked like prior to this space. I was just always dependent on my parents. I never really had any responsibilities. My parents didn't talk about money. And so even though I was always working, I would start a job with no money and leave the job with no money because I would just spend the money that I made. And it just became really annoying to have to ask my parents for money for things. At 28, as you mentioned, I ended up with $200 to my name. And I was like, I want to travel. I want to do things in life. And I need someone to help me get there.
And could you talk to us about what Finance for the Culture is, how it evolved since its inception, what inspired you to create it?
Yeah. So because I became a client first, I really saw firsthand what it was like to have someone who wasn't a traditional financial advisor, who actually got to know me, made the process enjoyable, really broke down financial concepts and met me where I was and helped me get to the goals that I wanted to achieve. And so because I love teaching and I love impacting community, at first I was like, I don't want to do this because I had a 9 to 5 at the time. But my financial advisor was like, hey, we came up with the plan and you implemented that so quickly and saw great results. Why don't you teach other people to do what you did? Like, you're relatable. There's a lot of people who started where you are, and for you to teach them how to bring them out of that situation, why not? And so I decided to get my license. And at first, my business was called Financially Attractive because all I wanted to do was become financially attractive to myself. I wanted to be able to look at myself and say, hey, you have a great credit score, you have savings, you have investments. But one day, Finance for the Culture just came to me. I felt like it, had a nice ring to it. And really, what it means is making finance accessible and digestible to your everyday person, and also changing people's perspective of what it means to be financially literate. And the culture is everybody. Like, yes, I do like to focus on people who are marginalized and often left out of the conversation, but the culture is really just anybody who is left behind by the traditional banking system, which is 95% of us, right? Yeah.
I think it's really important, and you're right about that. Not everyone is financially literate. Like for you to,
Hmm.
you know, be alive today, you're gonna have to make money and you have to know how to keep money and,
Yeah.
be responsible for that. But that's not something that we're necessarily taught in school. And for you, how long was that journey? Because you said you were 28 and still dependent on your parents. I feel like a lot of people out there would, really
Yeah.
resonate with that because it's really not as easy as it said. So would you
Yeah.
share with us how long it took you from having no savings to having, savings and being on the right financial path?
Yeah. So I always say that I had spent about, it would have been 10 years working and things like that. And my habits really hadn't changed, right? But then when I got the right education and guidance, it really only took me really and truly. So it was November of 2019 to May of 2020. That's when I had saved $10,000. From January to May, I saved $10,000. So the mindset shift, which is important, which people don't talk about, that happened very quickly. Sometimes all you need to do is hear something and be like, oh no, like I can't keep living this way. But the mindset shift, I would say it took a few months. As I was learning, I was like, yeah, like I can't keep living this way. I would have made so much money in the 10 years that I'm working, and I had nothing to show for it. And then to save, I was working a 9 to 5. They were paying me well and I was making commission. So I always like to be transparent about that. It took me 5 months to save the 10,000. And by month 9 of that year, I had saved $40,000.
That's really amazing, and I definitely feel you on
Thank
that.
you.
When I was in my early 20s as well, I had nothing to show for all the years I've been
Yeah.
working at that point. So,
Yeah.
I feel like it's really amazing. And would you share any like saving money tips for anyone out there who's like struggling is currently at zero?
Yeah. So again, like I really like to be realistic. Like the economy is wild, and it's definitely harder if you have responsibilities like rent and children, for example. So that's one of the things that I didn't have to worry about, which made me able to save about 80% of my income. I don't think that's an average situation. So I want to be honest about that. What changed between what I used to do, which is get paid and spend all of my money on food and clothes and be broke 2, maybe 3 days after getting paid, I decided to go cold turkey. So between January and June of 2020, I said, I'm going to go cold turkey. I'm not going to shop. I'm not going to use Uber. I'm not going to use Uber Eats or food delivery. I'm really just going to try to save as much as I can. Now, would I recommend cold turkey to everybody? Maybe not. I think there's a certain type of person that can successfully do that, an all or nothing type of person. But most people need more of leeway and balance. And so that's where it becomes an individual strategy of what works for that person. But for me, I really had to just cut out the crap. Like, I don't need more clothes. I don't need to eat out every day. I need to build an emergency fund because I literally have nothing. So that would be the first thing, cutting out those expenses. And then with those 6 months, I tracked every single purchase. I had a little spreadsheet and I wrote down every single purchase. That was an eye opener because it was like, wow, you really go to the dollar store and spend $30 on just random things. Like, you need to stop. So that was important. And then probably the most important thing though was having guidance and having someone that I could actually let them know, like, this is my goal, this is what I'm doing, and have them check in on me. The accountability piece was really, really important. So I would say those things. And then, of course, there's tracking apps out there that can help you categorize your spending and things like that. But it really has to start with the mindset. Like, your actions will never do anything that your mind isn't ready for.
I can see that.
Yeah.
And I think those are really great advice, like tracking your money. They always say that if
Yeah.
you don't know where you're spending your money, you're always going to lose it because you just don't know what you're doing
Yes.
with it. So I think that's like really eye
Yeah.
opening. And having, of course, the
Hmm.
accountability from yourself and from
Yeah.
others. I think that's a lot of what people go to you for help to like get
Hmm.
those like resources. So I'm so excited for everything else that I'll learn from you today.
Yes.
And I wanted to talk more about finance for the culture. Could you elaborate on the mission and your personal vision for this company?
So the traditional banking system isn't really built to cater to your everyday person, your average person. In order to sit down with an advisor at the bank, typically you have to have a certain amount of money. I have countless of experiences myself and other people where they go into the bank and they try to ask questions, and either the bank teller isn't able to answer them, or they'll direct them in the wrong direction, or they'll say, yeah, you can speak to an advisor, but here are the guidelines. And if you go on the TD website, I'm name dropping, no shade, we need the banks, but we need to know how to use them, right? It will say you need to have $100,000 of savings or investments to be able to have a relationship with an advisor. And so for me, it's about making the information accessible. Like, it doesn't matter how much money you have, it doesn't matter what walk of life you're on. If you want to improve your finances, the information should be accessible to you, and it should also be enjoyable to be on that journey. It shouldn't feel condescending, or you shouldn't feel like you don't belong. It should really feel like someone's meeting you where you are and helping you shift those habits to get to your goals. So for me, that's what it's about, turning a sometimes overwhelming, uncomfortable experience into something that people feel empowered about. So that's really the mission, to change how people feel about money and feel about getting help from an advisor, and empowering them to know that if they make these small changes, they can really see a big difference.
I think for a lot of people, they have this fear about money. And I think
Hmm.
that also hinders
Yeah.
them from making money because, you would
Yes.
walk. Obviously, it is very dangerous to just be walking with wads of cash, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's these types of lessons that make people
Hmm.
kind of fearful about having money, making money because
Yeah.
they're like shunned from these types of like resources that actually allow them
Yeah.
to build wealth and, be
Yeah.
successful at it.
Yeah.
When you think of financial success, what does that mean to you, both personally and what do you think it means for your clients?
Yeah. So I teach my clients to have certain pillars of finance. And when you have those four, then you've achieved financial success. So there's things like how to protect your income. There's things you could put in place, different types of insurance that will protect your ability to earn income. That can, if you get sick, you're not depleting your savings and investments. It's having a good grasp on debt management and your credit. It's having an emergency fund or some sort of savings that can help you in the event of income being compromised. And it's also investing, whether it's actively or having investments. That's essentially the financial house, and having those components in place, of course, done properly, will ensure that you have some sort of financial success. That's going to be the way that you achieve your financial goals. But more than that, actually having the information, like the knowledge, understanding, like, oh, I have a lot of debt, and the reason why I'm not able to chip away at it is because of the interest rate. Like, knowing those things, knowing those terms, because even if you don't have money or you fall on hard times, the knowledge is going to get you out of those hard times. Like I always say, if I ever become super, super broke, I will know what to do and what not to do, compared to when I was broke, I didn't know what to do. So I basically stayed stuck, right? So knowing how to manage your money and actually implementing those strategies, that's financial success to me.
And what would you, since we're on the topic of that, what would you do
Mhm.
differently if you one day or maybe tomorrow you woke up and you were back to zero again, but knowing now all the knowledge that you have about how to make money again and how to be successful and be responsible with it, what would you do differently?
I believe that at 28, I had waited too long to ask for help. And time is the one thing that you don't get back. And waiting is expensive. And that's what I've realized with different situations. Waiting is expensive. And so I would right away talk to a mentor or whoever accountability partner and be like, hey, like falling on hard times, what do we need to do? But the thing about it is now I built a pretty decent foundation, which has helped. So when I had saved that $10,000, probably a few weeks after, I was actually let go from my 9 to 5. They fired our entire sales team of 5 people, but I had that emergency fund. So there was a time between me getting licensed and yeah, there was time between getting let go and me getting licensed where I wasn't actually bringing in income, but I had that emergency fund. And so being able to have the foundation means that now it would be less stressful. Like I put my insurance in place, I invested when I had the money, I diversified my investments to know that I wouldn't be falling at zero. I would have, I don't know, like a backpack, for example. So that's really, really important. But I would say definitely asking for help way sooner. And then also being open to going back to work. Like I'm self employed, I work for myself. And I think sometimes when people are self employed or they have their own business, they fall in hard times and they want to grind it out to prove to people that they started a business and it was successful. If you have to go back to a 9 to 5, you have to go back to a 9 to 5. And I think that conversation needs to be normalized because at the end of the day, your friends usually don't help you out when you fall on hard times, especially if you're a business owner. The average person can't ask friends and family to help them out. So if that needs to happen to get you out of a situation, we need to be open to that.
Hmm. What I'm hearing is you
Yeah.
really just need to like save a few dollars out of your like pay every single month just to have that
Hmm.
emergency,
Yeah.
to fall back because you really can't tell the
Yes.
future, and you
Yeah.
can't always like depend on other people. You've got to have
Yeah.
your own back, especially financially.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
what systemic changes do you hope to bring through financial education?
Yeah. So off the bat, when we understand how money works, we just move differently. We spend differently. We want to become more producers than consumers, and everybody is both, but you want the ratio to be more of what can I do to like build up my home base versus spending on unnecessary things. So that's one thing. And then also financial independence. Eventually, I'm sure everybody wants to get to a point where they don't have to rely on others to be financially comfortable, but also to not have to work for the rest of their life. And when you understand how money works, you realize way more, you're aware of way more opportunities. You understand the value of starting a business and creating a system that allows you to make money without you physically working, put your money in different places, you make better decisions, you impact your community. So there's so many things, and all of these things impact um, how we move in the world and what we have access to as well. So even if we don't physically have money, you understanding how it works can get you in certain rooms, which is important. Yeah.
I definitely see that because, like, everyone says money can't buy happiness. And I guess to a
Mm,
degree, that is very true. But to enjoy anything in this life, in this world
yeah.
today without any money is just not happening. So I really
Yeah.
think you have to be, responsible. And I wanted to ask you about that, about
Hmm.
investments, actually. If you're
Yeah.
first starting out, within your investment journey, what does it mean to
Yeah.
diversify your assets? What does it mean to do all these things? And what would be like the best thing to invest in as a beginner?
Yeah. So diversifying means that you're not putting all of your eggs in one basket, that you've invested in different things, so different types of investments, and also potentially different industries as well. And that just means that, if one area isn't doing so well, like all of your money isn't in that one area that's not doing so well. So it could mean a mix of stocks where you are purchasing a piece of a company. It could also be physical things like gold, for example, or maybe a property. And I would say if someone is starting out, the easiest thing to do would be to use the tax free savings account. The tax free savings account gives you a bonus on your money. It's what we call fixed income or fixed interest. And every year you're going to get a certain amount of money for having your money in that account. And anything that involves your money growing is considered an investment. So even if it's not a risky investment or it's not in the stock market, it's still considered investing. So I would say that would be the easiest way to start investing, because you'll be able to see like, oh, my money is going to work and it's growing, right? And then trying to figure out what else to invest in, it really depends on you. Like, what are your financial goals? How much money do you have to work with? What's the timeline? When do you want to access this money? Are there specific things that you want to invest in? All of those things come into the conversation. So it's really personal. And that's actually something that I often say. People love investing because it's sexy. The idea that you can make a lot of money without working is a sexy thought, but it could also go the wrong way if you don't know what you're doing. And so you really want to be mindful of doing things that make sense for your situation. Like, a lot of people during COVID lost crypto or lost money in crypto because they saw Joe and John and Angela and whoever investing, and they weren't ready for that risk level. So you got to really like watch your own pockets, focus on your own goals, and invest in a way that makes sense for you.
And what does it
Yeah.
mean to you to make finance accessible, digestible, and fun?
So on my Instagram a few years ago, when reels and doing those audio or those like acting audio scenes became popular, I was like, you know what? This is a way for me to get out of my comfort zone and show people my personality, but also finance edition, right? So I would teach people things, but in a way that was fun, in bite-sized clips and things like that. And I enjoyed it, and other people enjoyed it. And I think it really showed people that finance doesn't have to be scary or overwhelming. It could actually be enjoyable to learn about different things. So doing that through social media, where everybody's on social media, that's accessible. I started my business during COVID, so everything was virtual at one point. That's also accessible. I can have meetings with people across the country or in different countries if that needs to happen. Virtual workshops can reach hundreds of people. Digestible just means that people can understand it. So I don't speak in corporate finance lingo. I speak like me, which is understandable to the average person, and people don't feel like, okay, like I'm more confused than I was before I asked the question. No, I like using analogies to make people really understand what I'm saying. And then fun, of course, I'm just a fun person. Like, I love creating environments where people enjoy themselves. And so I crack jokes and we will laugh. The meeting's not going to be stiff and serious. Like, yes, we're going to be talking about serious things, but you will enjoy the process of working on your finances. And so that's my mission. And I know I'm currently doing that, but my mission is just to again show people that this journey does not have to be as scary, boring, overwhelming as people might think it is.
I really like that.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people will too, even if they're younger or even older,
Yeah.
because, like we said earlier, it is very overwhelming learning all of these like
Yeah.
financial lingos and talking about
Hmm.
investments and all future things. These are just like everything that can be overwhelming. So if
Yeah.
you're, a young adult trying to get into finance, it's accessible, digestible, and fun, and you're learning
Yes.
from someone like you who makes
Hmm.
it a great experience. And even if you're older and you feel like, the moment has passed you by, for someone to, sit
Hmm.
with you and be like, this would be a fun process. I think
Yeah.
it just makes the whole process better. And
Yeah.
you learn better this way when you
Yes,
have someone
exactly.
I really like that.
I just want to add something too, if you don't mind. I think sometimes through the history of financial advising services, it's been made to seem like this stuff is unattainable and people can't learn it. 4 years ago, I didn't know anything about money. I was being told debt is bad, never get a credit card. If I never got a credit card, I would have never increased my credit score. Learning the language of money is just like learning anything else. Like, if you take swimming lessons, you will become better at swimming. If you start running, you'll become better at running. The same thing with this. It's less about numbers actually and more about concepts. So I just want to encourage people, anybody can learn to be better with their money. Anybody can learn to be familiar with the language. And I'm a living testament, like I'm a walking testimony of that. I literally didn't know anything about money 4 years ago, and I learned, and I'm still learning. There's so many things to learn, but I'm way more confident than I was 4 years ago. And that's for everybody, no matter what your age is, you can learn to understand money.
And what was that
Yeah.
transition like? Because you mentioned earlier it was a mindset change from you
Yeah.
struggling with your finances to becoming a licensed financial services professional. What was that
Yeah.
transition like for you?
Yeah. So when I first was learning these different things and implementing them to my own life, I was sharing them with other people, which was really helpful because, people know anything about social media. Like, if you're looking for it, you will find it. So my feeds became more finance focused because I was posting things, sharing things. I would always say, like, hey, I'm not licensed. I'm not an expert, but this is what my advisor told me and it helped me. And this is what I did, you know? And then when I decided to study to get my license, I was being trained on a daily basis. I was attending meetings and webinars and learning these concepts. And so I was really in the environment to learn the language and get better at it. And that's essentially what people have to do. Like, if you want to be better at your finances, you need to go to those workshops. You need to start consuming that kind of content. That's the only way. You might have to change your friend circle. If all of your friends aren't serious about, you being a little bit more disciplined and they're negatively influencing you, you might have to say, hey, you're my friends for this, but let me go find some people that are on the same wavelength so that I can be immersed in that. So for me, it was just about being in the topic, around the topic, in those conversations, and just developed from there.
And what advice would
Yeah.
you give to other aspiring entrepreneurs who want to turn their personal experiences into a business?
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. Because people, they say people don't buy products, they buy you and they invest in you. And, they need to be able to connect with you. I would say share and be honest because that's what I did. By the time I was licensed, I already had shifted people's mindset about what I did and who I was. It's like I became the finance girl before I became the finance girl. And that's just because I shared. I shared my before, my during, my after. And I had an event in July and someone had mentioned that they were, entrepreneur going through hard times. It's hard to balance work, school, business. And I was like, why don't you start sharing that? Like, maybe you create a series every Monday. You just talk about, like, hey, this is my day. It's really hard. I'm balancing this. Like, you don't know how many people can relate to that. And you build community by showing people that you are just like them. So I would say not being afraid to share the journey and share great decisions you've made and not so great decisions you've made. Like, recently, I've made bad investment decisions. I've spent over $10,000 probably on just junk. And I share that because I think sometimes people think that because I'm an advisor, like I'm just perfect. Like, I don't take Uber every single day sometimes. And like, no, there are certain decisions I've made that aren't great for my finances, just like you. So that part is really important. Like, not trying to portray yourself as this perfect person, but as someone that is relatable, and then showing people, like, I'm different because of these reasons, but it's not because I'm that different from you. It's because I learned certain things. Yeah.
I think that's great. Like sharing your experiences really shows how real it can be. And just because you're
Yes.
teaching a certain subject doesn't mean you're already such a master at it that you can't make decisions that are also wrong sometimes. And
Yes. Exactly.
how important do you think resilience is in entrepreneurship and how do you cultivate it?
It's so important. Um, every day is you can't predict life in general, but as an entrepreneur, you really can't predict life at all. So it's really important to, going back to what I said, watch your own pockets, but focus on yourself and what you want to achieve. I'm so grateful for social media because it's helped me build an amazing community. And most of my clients come from social media. However, sometimes it's hard to look at it objectively, and a lot of people are comparing themselves to other people and they think that they should be in certain spaces or places or levels because of what they're seeing. You got to run your own race. Like, you really, really got to run your own race And you also have to have people around you who are going to remind you and encourage you, like why you started, the great things you've accomplished so far, and what else you set out to do. And I think that, I don't want to say this generation, but a lot of people have fallen into this entitled mode of like, I should be here by a certain time, or I deserve this. You are only going to get what you put out. You're only going to get what you give. And so we should all be mindful of that. And we should give ourselves grace as well, because it is an uphill battle. It is bumpy. It is different. Like, you really got to learn so many skills to manage a business. And if you truly want to achieve your goals, you need to be realistic.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on that, what you said earlier about just like social media and watching your own pockets, like, because I feel like
Hmm.
the way people view financial success today in the age of social media is very
Yeah.
different. And I think a lot of people see what success looks like for other people and try to emulate that and maybe make bad
Yeah.
decisions because of that, because they're trying to look a
Hmm.
certain way on social media. So I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you, what have you seen are some of the most common mistakes that people make when it comes to their finances, and how can they avoid that?
So I always say that your relationship with yourself will directly impact your relationship with money. Not being able to look at something and be like, oh, that's great for them, but this is not my life and that's not really what I want, comes from self confidence and self love and knowing yourself, which is another topic that's finance adjacent, but not usually a part of the conversation. Also, too, I noticed that those same people who are flashing the products and the designer and things like that, those people also come to me for help. And sometimes the math doesn't math. Sometimes what they're portraying is not what is actually going on with their finances. So we got to be mindful of comparing to people that we don't know, right? One of the things that I see a lot is trying to keep up with the Joneses, or trying to, like, your friends always want to go out and you know you have certain goals that you know you can't really afford it, but you do it anyway because you want to keep up appearances. It is so hard to tell people, you know what, I don't got it right now, or you know what, I have a real serious goal that I'm trying to hit. Please don't invite me out for the next 4 months. It's hard to do that. But like I said, most of the times we can't ask our friends to help us pay off a credit card. We can't ask them for 200 bucks if we fall on hard times. So we need to make sure that we understand our actions cost money, like either cost time or cost money. And also, what I'll say is, because I did see a video recently of, apparently it's a whole business where influencers can rent out spaces that look like their homes.
Mm.
They can rent cars that look like their cars, or they can, maybe they're getting gifted designer items and they make it seem like they bought it. It's very easy to put on a facade. And so it's so important that you stay rooted in what you truly want. If you want the car, the house, the designer, the yachts, the traveling, that's amazing. But if you're maybe more minimalistic and you don't really care for designer or the fancy cars, then that's you, and you don't have to change that just because you see it.
And how can individuals overcome the fear of finance and start taking control of their financial future?
The first step is admitting that you need help. That's the first step, admitting it and then asking for help. Whenever people book a consultation with me, I always congratulate them and thank them and say, hey, like, this was a big step and this is the step in the right direction. It's really hard to skip steps when it comes to your finances. You really have to do it step by step. So that first one is really important. And yeah, when people make the decision that they don't want to keep living the way they're living and they want to make change, that's really, really big. But also, too, avoiding it is not going to eliminate the fear. Like, if someone is tired of being fearful of their finances or talking about money, not doing it is not going to build the muscle you need to address it. So, with anything else, with working out, you build the muscle. Consistency, dedication builds the muscle. The same thing happens with finance. If you never address it, the muscle will be weak. But if you address it, you can start building it.
And for those people who are tired of, not looking at the problem and not acknowledging that there is a problem, what are some simple
Yeah.
steps that they can take to improve their financial literacy as early as today?
You can follow me on Instagram. I'm always encouraging people to take that step. Also too, you know what? It's so interesting. It's kind of hard to answer that question because I always tell people like you have to get to a point where you're fed up. Like whether you keep seeing videos or you keep seeing people, living life and you can't do that, or you keep seeing your account of the negative, like eventually you get to a point where you're like, I need to change. And yes, people can encourage that, but that level of urgency really does have to come from you. Because, like I said, 10 years working, starting a job, ending a job, starting a job, quitting a job, no money. Eventually, I was like, I can't keep living like this. And that's when I went to seek out help. So, if somebody really wants to make that change, they're going to have to change what they're doing. So, new content that they're consuming, new habits. Maybe they have a family or a friend who's doing really well financially. Ask them, like, hey, what did you do to get started? But it really has to come from that person.
I definitely resonate with that when I was in my early 20s as well. I just got, so tired of feeling like I couldn't do the things I wanted to do or buy the things I wanted to. It just
Yeah.
something really has to click and be like, I can't live like this anymore. Like I need to do
Yes.
it's either I need to start saving more or I need to earn more. There's something,
Yes.
in between those two choices that you can do maybe all together cumulatively to
Yeah.
help you with your finances. And I wanted to ask, what about advice for someone who feels overwhelmed by debt?
I also do just want to add something too. Implementation is important. You can hear, see all you want. When you learn something, you got to implement it. Because I have a lot of meetings with people who they take the first step, but then it's like, this is not it. Like, this is not all. You took
Mhm,
the first step, and now we got to keep stepping. So
mhm.
that's something that's really important. I'm somebody who's overwhelmed by debt. The biggest thing that I find is that people actually don't understand how debt works. And so if you don't understand how something works, you will not use it properly. So the first thing would be to get someone to sit down and really explain how debt works, how credit works, how interest rates work, how they affect your money, and then look at your situation and see what you're doing. If it's good, if it's helping you, if it's not, we got to change it. And that is something that I also help with. At the very beginning, I was more focused on helping people with debt, but now it's a broad scope. It's the you know most people's issue is with debt, but there's so many other moving pieces to your finances. But definitely, you gotta understand how it works, because if you don't, then you're probably not taking care of your debt in a way that's gonna help you clear it as fast as possible. Yeah, but
And
also grace. Like they don't teach us how to use these things, so we have to be able to give ourselves grace of like, look, you made these decisions, you didn't know. How to fix this is to learn what I did wrong and how I can never do those things again.
more on financial planning and management advice.
Mhm.
What should people focus on first? Saving, investing, or paying off debt?
It really depends on the person. And that's something that I find people like don't like, that I'm like, it depends on you. It depends on your situation. I have to take a look at your situation. There's blanket advice that we can give, but if it doesn't make sense for you, then it might not work. So it really depends. If somebody is making great money and they don't have any savings, they don't have any investments, they don't have any debt, it's like, okay, great. All the money that you're making can go towards building this emergency fund, building these savings, consistently investing. If somebody is living paycheck to paycheck, they have a lot of debt, they have a little bit of savings, maybe it makes sense to take a little bit of those savings and clear off the debt, because usually the debt is, it's costing you a lot to have that debt, right? And then there's other people who they have a little bit of everything, but they're not doing it effectively. So now we're looking at how can we better manage this money. So it really, really, really depends on your income, your expenses, and what's left over at the end of every month. That's going to determine where you need to start. So, for example, for me, when I got my 9 to 5, I didn't have an emergency fund. I didn't have any sort of protection. I didn't have investments. And so those were the things that we focused. I also didn't have any debt. So any money that I was making was going towards savings, investing, and all of those things. So it really depends on where you are, where you're starting from. That's going to determine which direction you need to go.
And in today's uncertain economic times, how do you think individuals can protect their income and their investments?
In terms of protecting their income on the 9 to 5 scale, like there really isn't job security. which is why it's so important to put a little bit of money aside every month. Because when I got let go of my 9 to 5, I was shocked. Like, when you get called into HR, you're like, what? What did I do? Like, I'm cool. But it happened. And luckily I was prepared, but you don't usually expect a change in income that way. And so you need to prepare in that way. And then when it comes time to, or in the on the topic of protecting your ability to earn income. So the average person, if they happen to get a medical condition or illness like cancer or something like that, they would need to take time off of work. And when you take time off of work, most of the time you're not going to get paid for that. So, a way to safeguard your savings and investments, you really want to look at something called critical illness, because that's going to actually pay you out if you can't work due to an illness or a condition. And what that does is that means that all of the time you took to save and invest, you don't have to interrupt that. You actually let the insurance company pay that money out. So that's very, very important. And I know a lot of people will say, oh, yeah, I'm healthy, I'm good. These illnesses and conditions do not discriminate. The healthiest of people are getting cancer, are getting heart attacks due to stress, environmental causes, lifestyle habits. Nobody is exempt. And so if there's a way to prevent that financial burden, then we want to consider that. And on the other side of that, we really need to strive to make multiple streams of income. So whether that's a side hustle or it's actually starting an official business, we need to be able to control a portion of our income and know we could actually create our own salary. I think that's really, really important.
And could you tell me, what do you think the role, or how important of a role does budgeting play in financial success? And how can people stick to a budget?
Yeah, so budgets get a bad name, and I think it's because people feel like if they have a budget, then it's so strict and they can't go outside of that. But really, it's simply a financial plan. So if somebody is making a certain amount of money and their expenses are a certain amount of money, the leftover amount is essentially what your disposable income is. So if you go over that and you're in the negatives, well, you can't spend that way. If there's excess, then obviously that's a great place to be. But now it's like, where do I want to put my money? So it's really just more about understanding where your money is going and less about you can't buy things, you can't shop here. Like I will never portray that because I think balance is important. However, if you can't afford to pay your bills and indulge in luxury, you have to make a decision. If you can't afford to do both, you have to make a decision. And your numbers are going to determine what you can do with your money. Like these numbers aren't random. You get paid, you have expenses. If you're in the negatives, then something has to change, right?
I think a lot of people who might be watching us are out there looking, to get financial planning and management help. So I wanted to ask you, could you walk us through some of the range of services Finance for the Culture offers?
Yes. So I do complimentary consultations where I sit down with people, we get to know each other, I get to know where they are, their financial concerns, their relationship with money. And on my side, they get to know my story and the services that I provide and what it would look like to move forward. The second appointment is also complimentary. It's a financial needs analysis where, just like I just briefly explained, figuring out what their income is, their expenses, their debt, their savings, all of those different components, and really figuring out how they've been moving in tandem with each other to see what they need to prioritize, what they need to implement, what they need to get rid of, and how they need to manage their money moving forward. And based on what those numbers provide us with, I will be able to say, hey, the next step is going to be this. The next step is going to be this, right? And so it's not a quick fix, it's a journey. And I'm really focused on building the relationship so that, if I helped you with budgeting and debt, maybe in 10 years, I'm helping you with your kids or your spouse or something like that. But those are essentially the appointments. And when it comes to the services, budgeting, debt management, insurance education and implementation, investments education and implementation, estate planning. I believe I said debt management already, children's finance planning, so RESPs, wealth building, all of that. And also showing people how to reduce their taxes as well. So I'm not a tax professional, but I know how to help people reduce their taxes. And you'd be surprised at how many people don't know what they can do with the Canadian accounts to actually reduce their taxable income. That's also something that I help with as well.
And can you share a success story where finance for the culture made a significant difference in someone's life?
Just one? Okay. Yes. So I had a client, I want to say this was maybe 2, 3 years ago. She had $80,000 of debt, and this was a mix of your fast money loan, cash money loans, student loans, owing money to family and friends. And she had just landed a really good paying job, and our mission was to clear her debt as soon as possible. And so I believe we did that in about, I think it was maybe like a year, maybe like a year and a half. And it was really just about figuring out what debt she had and what we're going to tackle first. Are we doing all of the little 200, 300, or we're doing the big stuff? So every single time she got paid, we had a meeting, and I was like, okay, so now you're going to pay this. Okay, you did it. Cool. Now you're going to do this. So really strategize a plan so that she knew exactly what her goal was and what she needed to do to get there. So that's one of my biggest success stories, because I truly believe that, again, having the money is one thing, but knowing what to do with it is another. It could have very well been she got this new job and just didn't know how to navigate paying off debt, and maybe even gotten into more debt. So I'm really happy that we were able to clear that.
And what has been the most rewarding aspect of your journey with finance for the culture?
Most rewarding, I would say, is when people tell me that they made the process enjoyable and that this experience was different than their typical experiences with advisors. I don't know, the best way to say, I'm very empathetic, and I never want to make people feel bad about where they are. I remember when I was, I think it was like grade 10, grade 11 math class, asked my teacher, like, hey, can you explain this again? I didn't get it. And he said, you should already know this. We already went over this. And I was just like, oh, from that point, I was like, no one's ever going to say that I was condescending to them, that I made them feel small, that I made them feel like I'm better because I know more. I'm like, nah, it's never going to happen. And so when people say, like, wow, you really simplified this for me, or I actually understand this now, or you're so understanding, you're so empathetic, like you make me feel safe to share certain things, that's the most rewarding thing, because you learn more when you feel understood and when you enjoy the process. And I just know that that experience is different from the average experience. And I'm really glad that I can give that to people.
I think that's amazing, you meeting your clients where they're at. Because I think a lot of the time people are also afraid to seek out the help like you were talking about earlier, because there is a lot of
Yeah.
shame about not knowing these things that everyone is supposed to find out, or like, there's
Yeah.
shame around having so much debt that you don't even know how to get out of it. So it just
Yeah.
hinders you from asking help. So I think it's really amazing the way you create this process with your clients. And before I let you go, I wanted to just ask, like, how do you stay motivated and inspired to continue your work in financial education? And what is next for the future for finance for the culture?
Yeah. How do I stay motivated? There's so many people that need our help. Like, there's so many people. I can't remember the number. Is it 40 million people in Canada? There's millions of people in Canada. And there's just so many people who need this help. They just introduced financial literacy as a mandatory course in the curriculum in Ontario, 2024. That's crazy. There's just so many people who don't have the education. Their parents don't have the education, so they can't teach them. The information is not accessible, and it's just a lot of generational poverty happening because of the lack of financial education. And so that itself motivates me. And then just when people share their experiences and thank me for what I do, that's also very, very motivating. And just knowing that this is such an important topic, and just by learning one concept or one thing could completely change your life, that's motivating. And what's to come in the future? Lots of things, but just more workshops, more partnerships. I also want to dive into brand partnerships to be able to combine finance with lifestyle, which is also going to impact and encourage and inspire a whole new audience as well. So just on the mission to really amplify, but also normalize the conversation of money.
And is there anything else you'd like to leave our audience for today, Shay? Any advice, any inspiring message, anything at all?
Yes, know yourself. It doesn't matter what age you are. There's a lot of things in this world that are distracting us from getting to know ourselves. And when you do that deep work to understand what you like, what you don't like, what your triggers are, your goals, your strengths, all of those things, you will be able to do great things in different areas. Like that confidence and self love that you build is going to impact every single area of your life. So you really, really need to focus on becoming the best version. That doesn't mean being perfect, but knowing yourself like the back of your hand is going to help you in moments of conflict or tough situations or being able to celebrate yourself when you do great things. So I would encourage everybody to take the time to actually get to know themselves because that's going to impact everything in your life.
Thank you so much, Shay Myers, for joining us today on this episode. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate. I hope everyone had fun and learned something new in this episode. I will be sharing all of the links for Shay's company down below, Finance for the Culture. So if you need anything like workshops and all the resources to start your financial success story, then those will be in our description below. Thank you so much again, Shay, for the time, for gracing
Thank
our
you.
podcast and sharing your wisdom with our listeners. And thank you to everyone who listened in today. This has been your host, Patricia. And remember, for all your professional business and technical writing needs, there's only one way to go, and that's with the right direction. See you guys soon. Goodbye.